Good evening and welcome to Poems On. This is the 7th show of the second year. And our theme tonight is learning. My guests are Claudia Gary, who's a returning guest from last year, and Dan Brown, who, although he's a new guest in the show proper, has appeared quite often as a reader in the open mic. So welcome to you two. It's good to see you.
Great to see you. Wow.
Great to see
Thanks
you
a lot.
too.
Excellent. So we all know each other well. I'm going to ask Dan to start us off, please.
Okay, great. Thanks, Al. Thanks for inviting me. Claudia, pleasure to see you and to be reading with you tonight.
You too.
So the theme is learning. This poem is not formally in a learning type environment, but like a lot of the poems all of us will be reading tonight, there's learning in various venues and various quarters of life. So here's one, and it's called Curriculum Vitae. He gave it barely a glance as I fleshed out one or another line. It was me that he was studying until, all very fine, but what we're really looking for is the sort of seller who can peddle shit in an envelope. What makes you think that's you? I don't recall it word for word, but the gist of what I said, that I thought my communication skills would stand me in good stead. Some words that stay in spades with me are those he had to say before he rose to show me out. I'm glad you feel that way.
I assume you got the message.
Oh, did I ever?
But honestly, was that a job that you really wanted, or were you in dire need?
Well, both. No, I had been studying music for years and decided I didn't want to become a music professor. And I had worked with computers in my music studies and thought, maybe I should get a job in the technology field somehow. This job is actually a job to sell copiers for Canon Copier. You heard it here first, world. And but it was, it's a machine. And I figured it was a job, and I saw it listed, and I wanted the job. I was trying to transition out of my academic career into something else. This was an early attempt and an early splash of ice water in the face the very first time out of the gate.
Is that the most memorable brush off you got in your wanderings?
Yeah, probably the only one I think worthy of writing up anyway.
Wow. Well, thank you. The operative phrase that comes to mind for me is what I say to people whose performers whom I've seen, but I wasn't that crazy about what they did, and then they come up to you later and you're forced to say something. There's this phrase that musicians use a lot, at least my corner of the music world, and that is, I really like what you're trying to do.
That's really good. I'll have to remember that one. I mean, that's a little nicer than don't call us, we'll call you, which is another one.
So thank you, Dan. Claudia, would you go next, please?
Hi, Al. Yeah, thanks. I'd like to read a pair of poems that are based on fairly early childhood memories. And I call this Two Aunties. The first one is called Aunt Rose. Young ladies in their rubber bathing caps swim measured strokes across the basement pool of the Barbizon Hotel. Not an ear, not a curl is visible. Their strong-legged kicks resound as Aunt Rose shows me geometric wall tiles and ropes of floaters bobbling between lanes. We stroll next door, where blue-clad Peter Rabbit looks up at me from glossy coated paper, pressed, bound, and cut. His mouse friends sort bright beads. A kitten nearly gets baked in a dumpling. With this month's new book in a crinkly package, Aunt Rose takes my small hand and walks me back to her own lobby shop, joining my mother amid the shelves of thin-boxed, shiny nylons. The dried-off swimmers march in on high heels, then out again. How straight their stocking seams. Rose isn't my real aunt, but one whose nephew died in the Navy during World War II, leaving a girl who would have been his bride. The young girl pulled together, studied art, got a job, went to a dance, and found a husband. They had 2 baby girls whose ties to Rose are echoed splashes, chlorine rubber air, mosaic tiles, beige silk, synthetic mesh, and stubby books whose sweet aroma floats through and around me as I fan the pages.
Thank you.
So,
Lovely management of the imagery there. It's nice the way it recurs at the end. Thank you.
thank you. So I'll read the second one now, right? Okay.
Sure.
So the second anti is antiseptic. Yeah, I know that's kind of precious. Antiseptic. My father dabbed peroxide on my foot and watched it bubble where there'd been a splinter, reminding him of something he had learned from training in the Air Force. It's surprising, he said, but you will never be without an antiseptic if you use your urine. My mother shouted from the next room, "Hey, don't tell her things like that." I sensed a strange new light, but couldn't say just what it is or whether it was pretty. Pretty meant so much to Mother. Pretty furniture, sculpture, and bric-a-brac beside the window to cast unusual shadows. Pretty too were glimmers of the 59th Street Bridge as seen from Sutton Place in bumpy textured new paintings by a cranky relative. But what was wedged below the prettiness, and how far down? Was it buried too deep to tweeze it out and cleanse the wound? I soon would find an elixir captured between decor and rough landscape, between alluring reflections of an old bridge on the oil-slicked surface of a long polluted river and fish you mustn't eat swimming below.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now you paired these. So did you pair them because of the profusion of imagery in the first one that's so conventionally beautiful, and then the contrast in the second poem about the things that you came to see? And were you the same age in each of these 2 pieces?
Huh, good question. Yeah, partly because of, for the reasons you said, yes, the beauty and then the different and the strangeness, but also, but because they were both very early, formative in a way. I think probably somewhere in the first 4 or 5 years. I don't know which, I don't know if they were right in the same time, but close.
I thought the answer was going to be that they both start with anti, so that you.
Well, that's yeah, that was yeah. Well, that was.
But I'm a very superficial person, as you can see.
Well, that was just kind of an afterthought for pairing them, you know, an excuse for pairing them.
It's a good. I think it's a good. Well, I enjoyed both of these a lot.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And the first one, I was really intrigued with. I mean, the way it moves. First, you don't know where you're moving to. You're in a pool in the hotel, it looks like. And then you stroll next door from a pool, and you don't really know what it would be next door to a pool in a hotel exactly. And suddenly we're talking almost surrealistically about a mouse, a kitten, and like, what is going on? And that's pleasurable to me to not know what is.
Potter. Yeah,
I'm sorry?
Beatrix Potter.
Beatrix Potter.
Yeah.
So then this month's new book, I'm getting it now. I finally get it. And that I guess she's walked you into a bookstore. Well, you didn't. It's just like a jump cut. You just went from one to the other with no ado, no fuss, and so it made it brief disorientation. I found very,
I think,
very pleasurable.
Thank you. I think that's kind of what childhood is like, though.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's the feeling that I get if I were to see this in a film. You'd have the same kind of jump cuts if you're looking from a child's point of view, because the child isn't into drawn out consequence. She's more into the surface of things. So Dan, you're a perfect listener or reader for this first poem.
Should quit while I'm ahead, but okay, thank you for that.
If you're as superficial as you claim to be, which sorry, but I'm not buying it. I also like the variety in the structure of the second poem, where we go into character and we go into dialogue, and it's very realistic and very conversational. Yeah. The way that you have your mother call in from the other room and say, "Hey, don't tell her that." Yeah, I enjoy that.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's something else I'll just mention about the second one, but you really don't realize it until you read the rest of the poems you've given us, Claudia. This elixir, which is maybe the key word in that whole second poem. This is a preview of other elixir type moments in a few of your other poems. They all involve something which is, there's an experience or a region or a realm or something which is, again, superficially or on first, acquaintance, dark or disturbing or troubling. But these things turn out to be openers for you into another realm, artistic realm, spiritual realm. I don't want to characterize it because that would be not fair to it. But this is a recurring, it seems like this kind of event is something that you recur to, at least in this little set of poems that you've provided us. It seems like it may be a central kind of theme in your experience, or something that you find central in your self-sense as a writer even.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you.
Yeah, I enjoy the fact that this particular group of your poems are more serious than a lot of your humorous stuff that I've read and that I've heard more recently. So it was great seeing this other side of you. I think it's a perfect place for it.
Thank you. I should just mention these are all the poems that I brought today, I believe, are from a book that is basically a memoir in verse.
Oh, great.
Oh, cool.
Well, you know me, and you know that I often write about my own childhood. Yeah. And so it's a natural segue from what you just read to the first one that I'm going to read, which is about an event that took place when I was 7. And I give the details inside the poem. It's a part of a series of poems that I have sprinkled through my 3 books called How I Learned About X. And there are about a dozen poems so far on different things that I learned and how I learned them. And so learning being the topic of this one, I've already read some of my favorite ones in other shows. So I'm getting to some that I had not yet gotten to. This one's called How I Learned About Pain. My father strapped me when I was a boy, but only once. I disobeyed my mother and lied about it when she questioned me. I thought I'd fooled her, but my mother knew. "We'll wait until your father gets back home," she said. That took a long time. When he did, she met him at the door. When he walked in the kitchen, he said, "Get up to your room." The stairs had 13 steps. I didn't rush. I knew they'd talk it over. I crossed through the hall to my room, sat down on the bed, and waited. Then the footsteps on the stairs, deliberate. I counted them up to the landing and the short walk to my room. Lie down across your bed, my father said. His voice was even, like he wasn't angry. Take down your pants and underpants, he said. Face down on my stomach, that was awkward, but I wriggled both down to my knees. I wasn't looking at him, but I heard the slip his leather belt made in the loops, the buckle click, then quiet in his hand. I thought that he would hit me then. Instead, like he was reading from a list, he gave a reason. Then he snapped the leather down and I yelped at the hot patch on my skin. And then another reason and a snap. At 6, he gave a reason he'd used before. I said that wasn't fair. That gave him one more reason. I was crying. Still, I noticed that he didn't seem at ease. He paused before he hit me, and then after. He strapped me out of duty, but he took no joy in it. Although my bottom stung, I felt bad for him. I decided that I wouldn't put him in that spot again. So after that, I found ways to obey and still do what I wanted. 40 years went by before I got an explanation. I visited a year after he died and told my mother what I'd sensed that day. His father used to hit him all the time, she said, when he was growing up. He thought the old man used to like it, beating him. That's why he never raised a hand to you, except that once. At 7, I could feel it, his wrestling with the devil in his role, while knowing that I needed him to act. And deeper than my guilt or penitence, I could return a secret offering, a closeness, ransomed by exchange of pain.
That's amazing, a description of empathy at that young age.
I don't know why I was capable of it, but I remember feeling it.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it was because my dad was, he was a man of relatively few words around me, but I could always tell what he was feeling. And that's what spoke to me.
Yeah, that's quite an incident, and you render it very vividly and evocatively, and with it, and you make it look easy. It's not easy, but you simply tell the story very effectively in I think pentameter, blank verse.
Oh yeah,
as Claudia's was in blank verse, and a couple of spots that stuck out to me were when you say, I said that wasn't fair. That gave him one more reason. That's wicked. That's wicked in life, and that's wicked in this poem. That really is such a things come to a real focus right there. For me, they did. And also the other place where it came to a focus, and I like that it just kind of leaves it open, is where you say, so after that, I found ways to obey and still do what I wanted.
right.
That opens up like an entire world of how. I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing another poem that says what some of those techniques were, but
Well,
that's for another poem and another time. Just as a suggestive thing in this poem, it's very effective.
Well, thank you very much. And that line actually tells the story of the rest of my relationship with rules, which is to say, I found a way to make a rebellion of obedience.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I would find a way to obey the letter of the law, but still find room in there to do exactly what I wanted, which is what I'm doing technically with metrically in all my work. You know, I'm trying to be keeping very, very much to the forms, but make believe that they're not exerting any pressure on me and that I can just do whatever I wanted. So you're exactly right. Those are two key moments.
Yeah, well, you seem to have a really good counterpoint between end stop lines and then jammed lines, and
Yeah,
the way you play with the form.
Yeah, that comes naturally to me. Another thing that why I wanted to read this poem is that I think I wrote this quite a while ago, and we've lived into a time where this would probably get a knee-jerk reaction about, oh, this is abuse. But if you just stop at the point that having your father hit you is automatically abuse, you don't learn the lesson that I learned in the moment about what's on the other side of the pain that people are sometimes bringing to you.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I get to read it here. This is a good place to do it, I think. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much. Well, here we come around again, Mr. Brown.
Okay, thank you, Al. So this poem has a long title. It's a short poem with a long title. Poem taking the contents page of an intellectual journal as its point of departure. Time was when a title like, say, The Rise of Trade in 13th Century Albania would make my eyes glaze over with such rapidity that I'd never reach the inn. So why, with clouds of dotage gathering, do I seem to have become a guy who'd read a piece on anything? The mental lens is widest in the young, authorities aver, whereas, though no contrarian, I'd have to say my aperture has opened to the world of late, a mystery I'm in no mood to probe, my being in a state with only room for gratitude.
Very nice.
Very lovely.
Yeah, and you know the to go back to what Claudia was saying about jam and line endings, you manage the flow so deftly that the rhyme pattern is it's there, but it doesn't force itself on you. It just is taken right off the flow. And I think that's the most effective use of rhyme, is when you're busy listening and then later you realize there are rhymes. When you see a poem on the page, you can hardly miss that there are rhymes because they're stuck at the end of each line. But the way that you read, that's well concealed when you hear it declaimed. So thank you. I like the way that was handled.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thanks, Al.
Yeah, I like the concision of this.
Oh.
It's really nicely played against that small structure.
Yeah, thanks very much, Claudia.
Well, and we've all reached a stage in our lives where we understand exactly what you're talking about.
That's what I was going to ask, if both of you can identify with this in any way. Am I unusual in this, or has this happened to you guys also to any extent?
I wouldn't say that I'll read something about almost anything, but I will say that I'm more open to reading different things than I was when I was young, because when I was young, I was so conscious of reading as a writer, so I wanted to read the things that were going to help me. And now I feel like whatever I'm going to become, I'm pretty much there. And B, one doesn't have as much time spread out in front of one as one used to have. But I think it's important to live as though you still do. And so reading new things is a great way to keep that attitude, because you don't kind of pull in and start saying, maybe I don't have time to read the Iliad.
Take it from me, you don't.
Yeah. And that's for me. I do identify. I do agree with the sense of gratitude.
Yes.
I do also feel a lot of curiosity, but then quite frequently I say, well, I already know this, or I've already read this, or whatever. So, there's a lot of push-pull about it.
Yeah, I was surprised as I got older to find that instead of shutting down, I was actually opening up. So I really, in terms of my curiosity was broader instead of less narrower.
Well, it's
So
a great,
I am grateful for that. So I'm glad that you
yeah.
picked up on the gratitude, Claudia. That's
Yeah,
great.
that's a great thing to feel. I'm glad that you feel that. Because we all know people that basically, have been running this on the same racetracks for their whole lives, and they're not going to Hialeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, Claudia, number round 2.
Okay. So my next poem, I've arranged these chronologically in terms of life. And my next poem is a villanelle, and it's about something that actually did happen when I was about 4.
Wow.
And so I'll read it. Getting lost. In childhood dreams, I once got double-crossed. Familiar homes and sidewalks grown confusing, I found myself afraid of getting lost. My dream of wandering farther from the mossed rock garden soil where grandmother was choosing flowers to plant, that dream got double-crossed. Each townhouse on the block had been embossed with the same brickwork pattern. Losing, finding myself afraid of getting lost, of bad men in disguise who might accost and lead me to the wrong house, disabusing me of my faith and dreams, double-crossed into a different life. I turned and tossed, beat on my chest, awoke, but found no bruising, no traces of the fear that I had lost. Patterns of bricks, words, music, inexhaustible in variation, began oozing out of that childhood dream once double-crossed. I found myself through fear of getting lost.
That's a nice emotional outcome for what could be a troubling dream experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's I have a poem about a dream like that where I was being chased by the devil, and at the end of the poem, I'm chasing the devil.
Wow.
And it's a similar kind of thing that the emotional rush that you think is going to overwhelm you somehow gets transformed, and it's a blessing to have a subconscious that'll do that for you.
Well, yeah, in my case, it was not just a subconscious, but it was a physical act, beating on the chest. And, so somehow within the dream, I was able to tell myself, wake up, and use that to wake myself up.
Wow.
And I don't know how. I do not know how, but it was a lifesaver of some sort.
Well, I thought this was really a masterful poem.
Thank you.
It's perfectly done. It's not stiff. Al had his nice words about my poem. I would say the same thing about this poem. And Villanelle's even harder not to seem
Villanelle's tough.
overly sing. Although, frankly, I'm fine with sing-songiness in its place. So I don't know. Maybe I'm okay with rhymes that chime out in their place. If there's one place for them, it's a villanelle for sure. Can be. And I just picked up on a couple of things. The lost and losing, which turn out to both show up as end rhymes. I mean, once you see that losing come in, it's so, and you see that this already has confusing and choosing. So we know the oozing sound is going to be one of the rhymes, but still, it's just inevitable that lost was going to lead to losing as another rhyme in this villanelle. It's like a tumbler clicking in a lock. It's so inevitable and just seems so right to me. It's also interesting to me the way you use double crossed in these different contexts to me, and a little mysteriously, it might mean to be betrayed. It might mean to be twisted, or, dealing with two things contradictory at the same time, maybe all those things and maybe more that I've missed. But I found that intriguing. In exhaust is a great, clever rhyme to find for that. And
Yeah,
then
I like
here,
that too. Yeah.
and then here again, I found myself through fear of getting lost. Here's number two of these elixir moments that I referenced, was prefigured in that other poem. A dark moment turns out to be beneficial, turns out to be an opening, or
Yeah,
actually a
yeah.
big step forward. There's a poem of Robert Frost, "Where am I?" But he looks up at the stuff. There's a parting in the clouds, and he sees some stars, but he doesn't see enough stars to know what the constellations are. So he doesn't really know what stars he's seeing or where he is. He says, "Where am I? Oh, but please don't tell me. Let my heavenly lostness overwhelm me."
Ooh.
And I was reminded of that here. That's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful ending. I found myself through fear of getting lost. I mean, that's just
Thank you.
really masterful. I really quite
Thank
admire
you.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to mention, I wrote this in a workshop given by Molly Peacock at the Westchester University Poetry Conference. And there were some points where I almost became stuck, and I was kind of hesitant to take out a syllable in a line, and she helped me, loosen up and do that. So that was really thanks to her. And the incident took place actually while I was staying at my grandmother's house, because my mother was at the hospital. So it was really a disoriented time.
Mm.
And she did, in fact, live in a townhouse. And, and it was very easy to walk down the street and not know which one to go back to. So,
Right. Wow.
Interesting.
Well, it's great to be able to write about such early experiences, because there's a point beyond which we can't penetrate. But when you really think you were about 4, did you say?
yeah, I know.
Wow. That's extraordinary. To retrieve something from that, that early. Wow.
Well, maybe it's because of things that happened, that made it unforgettable, which is sort of a mixed blessing.
Well, I've never heard of anybody waking themselves up by beating themselves on the chest before, so it certainly qualifies as a memorable event. No matter what age you are, it's probably going to stay with you. Wow. Well, thank you. I quite agree. And the villanelles are fiercely demanding. So excellent. Well, okay. For my second one, I'm still in my childhood, but this is a little bit later on. I would say that my friends and I are about 9 or 10 in this poem, and my friend's little brother was a couple of years younger. So you're told that in the body of the poem. This is called "How I Learned About Blindness." Inexplicably, his face untroubled, my best friend's little brother stood atop a pile of blown out tires left of the entrance to the truck barn where my father's men housed their plows and tree cutting equipment. He held his head dead even with a row of windows which extended on both sides behind him, patient as we older boys picked up the rocks. The game we just invented was miss his head, but still break all the windows. An almost wholly unsupported trust buoyed up his grin as we took careful aim, and we were likewise blindly confident. We chucked the rocks. The shatter of the glass was such a hollow, satisfying sound. When more than 60 years had passed, I asked if he remembered how he'd felt and why he'd done it. He admitted sheepishly that to this day, he couldn't understand. It must have been stone cold stupidity. And yet, blind trust and confidence had both been vindicated. One undamaged boy, one bank of windows broken. How did fate not crush us all for tempting it so rashly? For one time only, blindness was a charm.
Wow. Yeah.
Claudia, you want to say more, or
No, you go ahead.
you're just overwhelmed. I don't blame you. Yeah, well, it's quite a striking poem in a number of ways. First of all, this actual incident is crazy beyond belief. I mean, the idea that this actually occurred is just completely unbelievable. And so when you, so leaving that, and so to this day, he couldn't understand. Damn right he can't understand. I mean, who could understand this insanity of this game that you kids apparently played?
Yeah.
A couple of things stuck out at me. One was, and I'm picking them up on second and now third reading, hearing you read it. I like that almost at the beginning of the third stanza. That's intriguing. An almost wholly unsupported trust. So there was a little justification for him believing that he wasn't going to have his head knocked off by one of these rocks. Maybe it's because he knew that whoever was doing it had good aim, or at least he trusted that you didn't want to secretly bean him. I mean, I don't know, or I don't know what it means, but it's intriguing to me. I'm happy not knowing exactly what it means. I find that an intriguing word. Another thing I noticed is this phrase that's just in the language, stone cold, whatever. We have a play on stone. I mean, that's what we're talking about here, I think, right? Is throwing, it is stones we're throwing, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was a nice bit of wordplay there. And then I really like this ending. For one time only, blindness was a charm. And charm is also a nice word because you got lucky charm and maybe other meanings of charm. And only this time. So that, you know, in the rest of life, this is not going to work out.
Right.
But here, you know, so you're aware of how anomalous in various ways this whole incident was. So those are my thoughts about it.
Well, thank you very much. I had occasion, a couple of things I can speak to your comments. One is almost wholly unsupported. This was the younger brother of my best friend, and he's just enough younger that in the neighborhood we were the godlike older kids.
Right.
And so we were famous for going around the neighborhood hitting everybody with snowballs in the winter. You know, we were known to be murderous throwers of things. And so that, coupled with the faith that he had in his brother, it's still not enough to explain why anybody would do what he did, but he did it. And I had occasion to actually last night, I told these two guys that we've been friends for almost 70 years. And I was on an email exchange with the two of them and reminded them of this incident and said, I'm going to read the poem tomorrow about this. And I sent each of them the poem. And my friend sent it to his younger brother. And so I wrote to the younger brother because I had actually asked him if he could remember the incident. And it was several years ago. And that's when he said himself that it was stone cold stupidity, knowing he'd become a collaborator in the imagery. But he said a very interesting thing last night, which was, I don't remember the incident at all. Now, my two friends and I remember it very vividly, and it happened. And if we'd hit him, he would have remembered it.
Or not.
If he survived it, he would have remembered.
Yeah, well, they were stones. They weren't pebbles. They were stones big enough to break the windows behind his head. So, they were good, a palm-sized stone.
Yeah.
And I can still remember the look on his face. It was absolute confidence that I suppose was the look on William Tell's son's face. But I never got to see that. This one I got to see. And yeah, when I look back on it, I cringe and I say, I must have used up my luck for the next 40 years on that one moment.
Well, I'm thinking now you probably put stones in those snowballs. Kids have been known to do that.
I never did that. Never did that.
Okay.
Never put snowballs in the freezer to make ice balls. We weren't vicious. We had no bone in any of us to hurt the brother. The point was to challenge ourselves to be unconscionably great.
Good phrase.
So anyway, you can see why I had to write about it, because it's you don't see this every day.
No,
anyway.
No, you don't.
So that's my moment, and all of the participants got to share this again last night, even though the victim had to be told his own story.
Wow.
So anyway, thank you very much. Third round, Dan.
Okay, this is a very short poem called "On a Fly Battering a Window."
Yeah.
Against a pane's impervious transparency, it beats for naught. May, if it lives, it learn from this. Though not, lest life seem just too fraught. Infer from this substantial scare that glass is hidden in the air.
Yeah. The first and the last lines of that poem are just extraordinary.
Oh.
So impervious, what was it? Impervious transparency, and then glass hidden in the air. Those are real gem-like images and phrases.
Thanks, Al.
I love the use of language there, and it's so apt. And we've all seen flies and birds, and sometimes people fly into glass without realizing it. And you've got it. I don't know if flies can think, but I buy it.
Well, that makes one of you. One reader buys it. That's good.
Yeah. Well, again, I like the concision. I like the images. I'm kind of still puzzling it over.
Oh, what's puzzling? Maybe it's not communicating successfully.
Glass being hidden in the air.
Yeah.
Well, this fly has some bad luck flying into this pane of glass, which you can't see.
Right.
So you don't. So you want him to learn something from it, but you don't want him to learn the wrong thing from it. What you want him to learn is not to fly into windows anymore.
Right.
What you don't want him to learn or conclude is that the whole world is full of secret panes of glass that he might be running into. And so he shouldn't be so paranoid. He shouldn't be so fear-struck that his life is ruined.
Right.
That's the burden. That's the burden of the poem.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. That's the payoff for this poem. It's a short poem, as you say, but when you talk about opening up a world, it really, if you think about the psychological underpinnings of human fear and risk, it's got great depths, and there are invisible things in the depths.
Cool.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Great. So okay. Well, my next poem is from a little later in childhood. I would say elementary school, and it's a pair of sonnets. It's called Mozart's Alphabet. So 1. Whenever Mrs. Glicker babysits, she brings crochet hooks and, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. I just want to say at this point in the narrative, it's referring to the protagonist as you rather than I. It's sort of in the mirror. So start again. Mozart's alphabet. Whenever Mrs. Glicker babysits, she brings crochet hooks and a ball of twine. While mom and dad see movies, she outwits toy stores and factories. She can design a sweater for each doll in your collection, sometimes a dress or skirt, and turn it out a swirly pattern wool or lace confection, all in an evening's work. You have no doubt that she's the best. So when she asks one day, "Are you folks Jewish?" you, of course, will need to ask your mother. Mom says in dismay, "I've been remiss." And soon you have a creed. Mom's insecurity has lit a fire. At least the cantor lets you join the choir. Part two. Each week, you have to learn a Hebrew text and taste the flavors of a holiday. Haman's hat stuffed with poppy seeds is next. But since this is your story, we can say the sweetest thing you find that year at Temple is polyphonic music you can sing. Soprano, alto, tenor, bass are ample with no part sung by any god or king. A choral alphabet may have been meant as practice, but for you it reigns supreme. Unlike the school tune, this is eloquent. This alphabet spells heaven in your dream. Some other song may hold words of a prayer, but those are just words. This song takes you there. Now, does anyone know which alphabet song this is?
Well, this thing that the polyphonic for soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. Well, I had an idea what it was, but I didn't know it was an alphabet song.
Okay, so
is it an alphabet song by Mozart?
It is.
So I got to think about that.
Yeah, it's.
Don't tell me yet. Al, do you know what it is?
I have the advantage of having looked at the YouTube clip that Claudia sent me. So I didn't know before she sent it. No.
Okay, so I asked Al whether he wanted me to screen share the YouTube. He said no, just sing a few bars. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. And that's got to
be a canon.
4 parts.
4-part canon?
Really I don't think it's
not
really
a canon. It's just harmonized in 4-part counterpoint.
Yeah, it's just harmonized, but then it has variations.
Wow.
Like this version goes A, B, etc.
Okay. Don't know. I thought I know Mozart pretty well, but that one I had never happened on.
Much better.
Yeah, you should send him the link, because it's she sent me a link of 3 3 parts. The one you sent of 3 young women singing it, and it's delightful.
I'm sure it will.
It's Mozart, so it's not going to stink.
Well, you just answered one. You just answered one of my questions, which is why it was called Mozart's alphabet. Now I understand why. All of us have some involvement in music, so this is a nice poem for all of us to. And that's an understatement where you and Al are concerned. For me, it's sort of the right way to put it. But again, in the first poem, we have this occurrence, which might be dark, this insecurity, the dismay. Mom now realizes that you've been exposed for the first time to some little tinge of anti-Semitism, or at least something negative.
No, just some ignorance.
Just some ignorance, right? Because I thought anti-Semitism was too strong, so just some ignorance.
No. The babysitter was Jewish.
Okay. Oh, Okay, well, your mother is still dismayed that she hadn't told you, I guess, hadn't told you that you're Jewish. Okay,
Right.
and so it results from, you say, her insecurity. She didn't feel comfortable saying it. She was afraid to tell you.
Yeah.
But something good comes of it.
Mhm.
So again, we have this dark, not dark, but this potentially negative thing that leads to something positive, as in these other poems of yours. And then in the second stanza, I like the way you manage this transition, but since this is your story, that's very deft. We swing it from whatever's going on in Hebrew school, I guess, to the fact that what Hebrew school was, the importance of Hebrew school for you is that you were exposed to the magic of music, polyphonic music, Mozart's music. And I like the phrase, unlike the school tune, this is eloquent. That's very concise, to use a word you applied to mine, and I put it right back in your court, beautifully concise.
Thank
And
you.
then this ending is just wonderful. But those are just words. This song takes you to heaven.
Yeah.
That's really lovely. And I really like this. I will tell you what I thought the Mozart thing was that you sang, which does take me to heaven and did when I first encountered it, was Ave Verum Corpus by Mozart. I don't know if you guys know that piece.
Probably. Can you sing it?
No, well, no, not really. There's no real tune. It's a 4-part little setting, probably lasts 3 minutes, if that, by Mozart. Very late in his life, one of those K6 something or other.
Oh,
AVE and then VERUM and then CORPUS. I can't
look it
commend
up.
it to you more strongly.
Look it up. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll
So-
look it up. I mean, the later you get the Keuchel numbers, the more I love what he wrote. So if it's in the 600s, I'm gonna love it.
Yeah, it's late and profound in the way that those late things are. Goes places that he didn't go in his
Right.
earlier
I'll look it up and
years.
let you know whether I've heard it before.
Great, great.
So for me, these two poems work together very well, in that the religious training that you're getting, that you turn into, that you seize on the exposure to the music. I would mention that I like the way that you take it even further, that it's music that could have a text, but you're responding to the tones in a pure way, not because there are words, but because the sounds themselves take you to heaven. So this for me is a natural extension of being brought to the core of religious feeling without having to put on the overcoat of the trappings of a particular faith tradition.
Well, then what you're saying is that the core of religious feeling is music, right?
Well, I'm saying that music is closer to expressing the core of religious feeling than music with text is.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, as a songwriter, what I'm saying is, as much as I love words with music, music by itself is a key that unlocks realms that words can't enter.
That's what unlocks. I mean, with words or without words, music, I think it can be a portal to religious, spiritual experience.
Yeah, well, I have to say that, for one who has reached the age of 5 or 6 without even hearing of religion, but knowing a lot about music, then religion becomes totally irrelevant. I mean, you encounter religion at that point, and it doesn't mean anything. It's not necessary. So already. Anyway.
Interesting.
Cool. Interesting. Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, these are great. I guess I'm up. We've been, except for Dan, who immediately vaulted us to the fourth quarter musings of a mature person. We've been we've been wading around in the shallow pools of extreme childhood and youth. So I'm going to come forward just enough to read a poem about an experience that I had when I was in the Army at the age of 22. And I learned an important lesson while I was being trained during the Vietnam War. And this is called How I Learned About Leadership. And the poem takes place, the events the poem describes took place at Fort Leonard Wood, which is in Missouri, in October of 1970. And just as a note, AIT stands for Advanced Infantry Training, which is what I was trained after basic training. Then you get advanced training. So this is where I found myself. How I learned about leadership. In AIT, my squad leader got sick with spinal meningitis. His stripped bunk was all we ever learned about his fate. The sergeants made me squad leader that day. I hadn't asked for it and wasn't free to refuse. Each morning, I was told to pick 3 men for detail. There were 10 besides me in the squad. 3 were good workers who didn't need a supervisor. 4 would do a decent job if you were watching. 3 would try to hide, get nothing done at all, unless you rode them every second. Results were barely satisfactory. They wore you out with their malingering. The Army could be pleased, and my day's easy. Just pick the same 3 guys who did good work each day. Or I can make my life a grind. Be vigilant, cajole, coerce, subdue. For all pains taken, average results, except for being fair to everyone.
Yeah, that's quite a recollection, quite an experience. It's almost like it's so clear. I don't want to say it's like a fable or a fairy tale exactly, but it sort of is. You've got the 10 people divided up into these groups, and it's just got that classic chiseled quality of an anecdote, which is kind of iconic. I mean, it's just a very kind of simple, chiseled representation of this dilemma or this choice that you had to make here.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah, exactly. It's a classic choice because you can take the easy way or you can take the hard way.
Right. I mean, that's from Aesop and everybody. These are the questions that come up in fables and in moral tales. So
Yeah.
here's a kind of moral tale, an adult fable, but nonetheless. And I mean, that last line comes wonderfully and really gives one pause. And very, very effective. And here too, I'll throw in the word concision that we've been kicking around. This poem is concise. The story, being a kind of fable, needed no more. We don't need atmosphere. We don't need details of what the barracks look like or the
Right.
dust in the window. But none of that matters here. It's just the bare bones are what you need and what you've given, and it's I think very well done.
Well, thank you. The way that I ended up solving the problem was to pick one from each group each day. And you hope, but then you still got to watch them.
Yeah. And you hope that the good ones will be a good influence on the other ones, right?
Yeah.
Good point.
You do, but you've got to watch them because even when they're a good influence, the guys that want to go sneak off will do it if you look away for a second.
Yeah, and you say that right in the poem. It's very, very real.
Yeah.
Well, those were the guys. That's what they were.
Yeah. I like this line. This one line has all these action words: be vigilant, cajole, coerce, subdue.
Right.
Now that's what it took. I mean, it was never ending because you were stuck in this place and you had nothing. There was nothing else. You couldn't go anywhere. you couldn't do anything except do what you were told or not do what you were told. And so it was up to the people running things to exact some kind of justice. So, but it really, that's why it's iconic, Dan, because it boiled reality down to just these building blocks.
Yeah, iconic is a really good word for that, for what I was trying to say. That's the perfect word.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's I haven't had a poem of mine called that before, but I'll take it. Okay, excellent. So we begin again.
Okay. All right, so I may have tweaked this one a little since I sent it to you guys, but not in any major way. It's called On Brooklyn Heights. Along their elevated edge, in case you didn't know, heights they really are, a mayor got to feeling generous and went and did, thank God, the obvious, which is to say, installed a walkway there, or promenade, to use the moniker the locals use. A venue, to be sure, for devotees of harbor breeze and sun, but even more, a place one visits for the vista it affords the visitor. A bridge with cityscape, you know the one. Myself, I'd settle for the bridge alone. A view my vision was at feed upon one morning, when there passed in front of me a father with a baby fastened on, all right, so hung against his chest in one of those what exactly? Seems that I should know, though there's the fact that I'm a guy who's never been a father. Anyway, along a father comes, discoursing as he passes to a little he or she that's born, it happens, facing frontally. The better to enjoy the view, one knows before it's made how one's objection goes, that all that stands before the infant's eyes, span, spires beneath befleeced cerulean, the infant no more sees for what it is than understands a word its father says, which doesn't stop the father's talk or mean that worlds aren't being taken in.
Beautiful. Yeah.
It's one way to look at that happenstance, isn't it? I guess the alternative of having one of those carryalls where the baby is on the father's chest, facing the chest.
No, frontally, facing out.
Oh, I understand. That's the one that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
But the alternative, which is to have the baby facing the father's chest. And when you, as a parent, I've never been a father either, so I guess we can cede to the parent in the group. That's a choice, isn't it? Whether you want to have your child floating in midair, looking at everything, or nestled against in the safe spot against the father's chest, where he can hear the heart reliably thumping so close by.
Well, I think it depends how old the child is. At a certain point, the child is more curious than it needs to be comforted all the time.
Really?
And, it can really be good. On the other hand, when the child gets old enough to be that curious, it can also kick. Which is not too great if you take the child to an art museum. But I'm not going to say anything else about that.
But at least if it's facing forward, it's kicking out into the air. It's not kicking you in the chest.
Wow.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, this is great. I like the word born. That's born. The little pun there. It happens facing frontally. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of nice hidden word, serendipitous word convergences here. Born is one of them. There are a few others. I've got to look at it. The vista it affords the visitor. Vista is so close to visitor.
Yeah.
In that line, So yeah, this is there's a lot to enjoy in this poem because the imagery is very evocative, the language is fun, and it's very much convincing as a kind of inward monologue, as what you might be thinking to yourself, rather than a speech about parenting.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, it's meant
Well,
to be
I
felt.
get the sense that you are enjoying the vista a lot, and then the baby, the father and the baby just kind of added something to it. And there's just so much wordplay in this that it's a lot of pleasure going on.
Oh, that's great. I mean, the poem seems to be about the vista, seems to be about being on the promenade, which I hope readers of the poem may have some familiarity with looking at it. It's of course, the Brooklyn Bridge.
I don't think I've seen that. I will.
If you've never been to Brooklyn Heights, that's the other, that's where the Brooklyn Bridge terminates on the Brooklyn side.
I think I've been there, but I don't think I've gotten that vista. Exactly.
Yeah, it's quite beautiful. The bridge in the city in Manhattan behind it, kind of. It's quite beautiful. And but it turns out that's really not primarily what the poem is about. It's really about, partly about the father being generous to this infant and helping bring it into the world, both by talking to it, even though it knows the infant can't understand a word he's saying.
Yeah.
And also by turning it around and facing it out and giving it the visual, world to experience. And also talks a little bit about how, the miracle that infants, what they do, sitting there in that papoose thing or whatever it is, they're learning to talk and they're learning to recognize things like bridges, the sky, buildings, and so much furious learn. It was your theme of learning.
Yes.
This miraculous learning that's going on with this infant that the father is abetting in what he's doing. And that turned out to be the principal thing that I took away from that morning. It was not the view of the bridge or the sky, but this father with his infant.
Well, it's nice. You have your perception of the landscape, but then you bring in the whole idea that other people see other things. And here you have an infant seeing what you're seeing, but for the very first time, she or he is seeing anything, practically.
Right.
So yeah, the play between the father and the child is, it really does, it creates this atmosphere of wonder and discovery that would be different than if you had the child nestled against your chest, not looking at the world, but still. So I guess so in other words, Claudia, you might have the one kind of harness for the first X number of months, and then you switch to the other kind?
Yeah, or actually some of them can be used both ways.
Really?
Yeah.
Neat.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That is neat. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, these are lessons I had not hitherto learned. So thank you.
Anytime.
Oh, yeah, great.
Thanks.
So I guess it's my turn.
No, it is your turn, right? I'm all dizzied by now. Yes, it's your turn.
Take a deep breath.
So my next poem is a sonnet, which is the shortest one so far, just one sonnet. It's called Mother's Day Remembered, and it is, at this point, it's early adulthood. Too early to have probably done the things that are described in the poem. But and once again, the protagonist is spoken as you. Okay, Mother's Day Remembered. Far from where your fierce glance and hers can meet, a laundromat on Rue des Pyrénées is where you learn to fold a fitted sheet, which, in a different language, seems okay. The Parisian who shows you how to place your hands in the sheet's corners, shake it straight, then bring both palms together, is an ace at teaching without judging. Why so late? At 21, you are a cultured waif, a refugee from family politics into another mess where you felt safe with hasty marriage thrown into the mix. Does this kind-hearted stranger know or care that her instruction holds a hidden prayer?
The bringing of the hands together. Well, there's a lot enclosed in those 14 lines about this person's life, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At first, I thought, just now I'm finally piecing this all together, because I had the feeling you were really young and not knowing how to fold this sheet. But of course, the person in the laundromat, you're old enough you are 21, I guess, right, when this is happening. And
Yep.
her why so late is like, why doesn't this 21-year-old know how to fold a fitted sheet? That's, I guess,
Right.
what I'm interpreting it now.
Yeah.
And teaching
But
without
you know,
judging.
that may not be adequately evident.
No, it is.
Hearing the poem, because in the written version,
It totally is.
italic.
It totally is. I'm a little obtuse sometimes.
Okay.
And that hidden prayer, only now do I realize the actual and visual accordance with the praying gesture. And this is yet, well, it's not one of these elixir moments exactly, but it kind of, but it's still a nice, expansive kind of moment just the same. And by the way, it's very deftly done. I mean, it's absolutely flows effortlessly the way the story is related. And not least of all, I would love to know how to fold a fitted sheet is the one with those things, those elastic edges that fit around the edges of the mattress, right? Is that a fitted, the bottom, what I call the bottom sheet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one.
I don't have a clue how to fold those things so that those. So offline, maybe you can demonstrate. But I think it's a beautiful poem.
Thank you so much. So the only elixir here is in the poem. The moment itself wasn't.
Wasn't an elixir, right?
So I have a question. Is there a kind of an undertone here that the lesson of how to fold the fitted sheet, which is going down so smoothly in another country with a different teacher, the speaker did not learn this lesson from her own mother at home.
Right.
And it's possible that if she had, the line about teaching without judging, is that a kind of does that imply slightly that it's good to learn this lesson so far away because it might not have gone so smoothly at home, and there might have been an element of judging going on that wouldn't have been as comfortable.
Right. Exactly.
And so getting married at 21 then becomes a kind of extension. Okay, then if you say so, you would know. 20 or 21, but young at any rate, is for some people a way to get a way to find some independence, but it's not as much a going to a new state as getting away from where you grew up.
Right.
And to me, all of that is implied in this poem, but it's so well concealed that, I mean, I kind of pride it out, but I just want to confirm for myself that that's kind of the subtext of the relationship between the woman and her mother and her upbringing and what she sees in the early stages of her marriage and what's eventually going to happen later, because hasty marriage thrown into the mix suggests that this is not destined to last for 50 years.
Try 6 months.
Well, that's why I'm asking you, because there are some things that I know about your own background, and I don't want any of that information to color what I infer from what you've written, because it should all be in here.
Yeah.
So that is what
I think you got it. Yeah. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Then, more power to you, because you've really suggested elliptically an awful lot about the life arc of this person. So,
Yeah.
well,
Of
well
course,
done.
the first line, far from where your fierce glance and hers can meet.
Yes.
Kind of a,
Well, that sets it up.
yeah.
But it's not. It's stated, but it's not dwelled on. You move right on.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just get right to it. So, yeah, I like it.
Thank you.
Well,
Now,
Al has broadened my appreciation of this poem. Now I'm curious about this line, into another mess where you felt safe. So, did you feel safe? Did you feel safe back with your mother? And this is now, because this poem is sort of contradicting the idea that you felt. I think
Well,
that she has a fierce glance.
Maybe there should be a comma after mess.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Got it. Maybe there should.
Out of the family politics into another mess.
Yeah. I actually think that for me is clearer for what it's worth. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wow.
Oh,
Great.
there's still time.
Of course, there's always time.
Always. Well, terrific.